Chapter 1. A Collapse in the Wings. It was on a damp London evening, the kind when gaslight halos waver like ghosts against cobblestones, that Hercule Poirot found himself roused from a leisurely dinner by the sharp rap of his door. Captain Hastings entered, cloak across one arm, a telegram trembling in his hand. "Mon ami, a summons from the Marlowe Theatre," Hastings announced, handing over the note. "Something dire, no doubt. They speak of foul play." Poirot smoothed the paper with delicate precision, adjusting his cravat before reading aloud. "Monsieur Poirot, a most alarming incident has befallen our company. One of our stagehands collapsed in the wings during the final rehearsal for The Scarlet Masquerade, and his condition worsens by the hour. There are whispers of foul play. I implore you to come at once. Sincerely, Evelyn Harcourt, manager, Marlowe Theatre Poison." Hastings' ventured brow creased. "Perhaps," Poirot replied, tapping his moustaches. "Yet let us reserve judgment until we observe the scene. Theatre is a world of illusions, Hastings. Our task is to find what lies behind the curtain of deceit." 7:30, they had traversed the fog-cloaked streets and arrived at the Marlowe's grand entrance. Its marquee advertising The Scarlet Masquerade glowed ruby bright, contrasted by the darkening sky. A pair of uniformed attendants ushered them into a narrow corridor where gas lamps flickered against crimson drapery. At its end stood Evelyn Harcourt, the theatre manager, her face pale beneath stage makeup highlights. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, thank you for coming so swiftly," she greeted, voice pitched low. "Our unfortunate Mr. Giles Turner lies between life and death. He collapsed during the curtained rehearsal just 10 minutes ago." She led them into the vast auditorium. The house lights were still dimmed. Rows of burgundy seats receded into shadows. On the raised stage, a single spotlight illumined a corpse-pale figure sprawled near the orchestra pit. Stagehands hovered in tense knots at the edge of the wings, whispering in hushed urgency. Poirot proceeded alone. He approached the prone form. Giles Turner, the stagehand, his pallor accentuated by the stark glare. A silver mask from the production lay discarded at his side. Poirot crouched, examining Turner's features. Eyelids half-closed, lips eerily blue, a trickle of sweat dampening his brow. Hastings lingered behind, expression grim. "Captain, observe the absence of struggle. No disarray in his costume, no signs of a fall," Poirot murmured, "and yet his breathing is faint, irregular." Dr. Prentice, the company physician, knelt to one side. "He's alive, but barely," the doctor said. "His pupils are sluggish, his pulse thready. It looks like poisoning. But what agent? And by what means?" Poirot glanced at the silver mask. "Notice, Hastings, that Mr. Turner clutched this mask in his right hand. If he suspected danger, he might have gripped the nearest object. Yet when a man is struck suddenly by toxin, his final actions can reveal his last thought." He rose and sniffed the air. No detectable scent of cyanide or laudanum, but the odour of almonds can be fleeting. I require an unfiltered sample of his morning coffee, and the prop room's green stage paint. Evelyn Harcourt's eyes widened. "Green paint?" "Poisons can be disguised," Poirot explained. "Digitalis, for instance, might be mixed into a wet medium. Paint, glaze, adhesive. We shall see." She dispatched a stagehand to fetch both items while Poirot moved to the wings. There, the hush was replaced by low murmurs. Crew members avoided his gaze, stepping aside as he passed. He noted the block of oak flooring where Turner had been stationed, marked by a half-concealed trapdoor leading to the orchestra pit. A tea tray sat on a wheeled cart, its decanter of coffee half empty, a porcelain cup stained with steam. Moments later, the coffee sample arrived. Poirot dipped a fingertip into the dregs. "Corrected for theatrical sugar," he said, "but I taste a slight bitterness like foxglove. And here," he pointed to the paint cans stacked beneath, "the green pigment shows a faint brown sediment." Hastings peered at the shelf. "You think the paint was laced?" Poirot nodded. Yes, Turner's duties included touching up scenery. He likely handled the paint before taking his coffee break. If poison adhered to his gloves or clothes, then transferred to his cup. He returned to Turner and poured the sample into a small vial. "Dr. Prentice, kindly analyze this. Meanwhile, I wish to speak with those who saw him last." They retreated to a side rehearsal studio, where performers in half-costume paced nervously. First was Helena March, the production's lead actress, still in crimson gown. She shook as she recounted details. "I found Giles just before the second act," she said. "He handed me my prop mask. It was damp, streaked with green smudge. I thought nothing of it. Moments later, he said he felt faint and collapsed." Poirot listened, eyes narrowed. "Damp mask and green smudge. Curious. You touched that mask as well?" Helena clasped her hands. "I wore it on my face, yes, but I cleaned it afterward. I was so frightened." Next came Philip Gray, the young actor who played the masked stranger. He helped carry Turner off stage. "Giles always had a nervous habit. He'd wipe his hands on my costume trousers after painting. That morning, he applied green paint, too, the backdrop, dipped his brush, and then wiped on my leg. I told him to use his apron, but he laughed and said he'd be careful." "You saw the paint," Poirot repeated. "Did you notice anything odd about its texture or smell?" Philip frowned. It was thicker than usual, almost grainy. But the green hue was perfect for the forest scene. It matched the foliage exactly. Finally, Poirot interviewed the prop master, Mrs. Selwyn, a stern woman with steel-rimmed spectacles. "Props must be clean," she insisted. But with the rapid scene changes, sometimes Turner rushed. This morning, he stored unused masks in this very cupboard. She opened a wooden case to reveal an array of masks: silver, gold, black. Poirot ran a finger along their edges, then paused at one. "This one," he said, lifting a silver mask, identical to Turner's, "bears a fresh streak of green paint." She gasped. "But that was Helena's mask. It was off stage when he fell." Poirot held it at arm's length. "The same sediment found on the paint can. I believe our poison was suspended in this paint, then touched to the mask. When Turner passed it to Miss March, the poison transferred to his gloves and then to his cup." Hastings looked sceptical. "But Mrs. Selwyn cleaned these masks between scenes?" "Indeed, but not the underside of the mask, where Turner corrected stray brushwork." Poirot replaced the mask gently. "Now, Hastings, we must confirm the toxin's identity." Dr. Prentice returned, bearing a small phial. "The coffee shows digitalis glycosides combined with antimony trace. An unusual combination. Digitalis for the heart, antimony for vomiting suppression. ingenious. So our victim consumed a slow-acting cardiac poison, then collapsed under stage exertion, Poirot concluded. Yet someone intended the final blow to appear accidental. In the rush, Turner fell near the pit, masking the poisoning as a fall. Evelyn Harcourt pressed her hand to her throat. But who would do this? Turner was well liked. Poison is personal, Poirot replied. We must look for motive and means. Digitalis grows in the Marlowe's garden. Antimony comes from stage makeup kits. Only those with direct access, our prop master, the gardener, or even the costume mistress, could assemble such a concoction. He turned to Mrs. Selwyn. Madame, your makeup trunk yields antimony salts. May I see your stock? She led them to the costume department. Poirot opened her kit. Powders, pigments, binders. He found a small bottle labelled zinc antimony, tincture, theatrical use only. He uncorked it, sniffing faintly. Yes, and here, a missing measure. He pocketed the bottle. Your gloves, Mrs. Selwyn? She shook her head. I have latex. These gloves are from the carpenter's loft. Poirot tapped his moustache. Then someone borrowed your kit. At that moment, a loud commotion echoed from the stage. They returned to find Turner propped on a stretcher, regaining consciousness. His eyes fluttered open at Poirot's approach. Monsieur Poirot, he croaked. Oui, mon ami, you are safe now. But I need your help. Who handled your cup this morning? Turner struggled to speak. Only me, and I passed the mask to Miss March. Poirot nodded, then crouched. Who had motive to see you leave the company, Giles? Turner closed his eyes in pain. I overheard. Someone complained about my pay, but I don't know. Hastings aided Turner's caretaker. Poirot stood, eyes bright. Our circle tightens. A stagehand who resented him. A fellow in the paint loft? We shall see. But first, recover. Tomorrow, the theatre's final rehearsal will reveal the culprit. He turned to Hastings. Mon ami, his recovery gives us time. Time to uncover resentments buried beneath the mask of camaraderie. Outside, the night breeze stung with fog. Poirot gazed at the silent streets. In this theatre of shadows, Hastings, the final, curtain has not yet fallen. Our little grey cells must paint the denouement with precision, and so, beneath the glow of the Marlowe's marquee, Hercule Poirot prepared to unravel the tangled plot of the Chieur. The Scarlet Masquerade, certain that one among the company had authored a deadly twist, and that justice, as always, awaited discovery. In the wings. Chapter 2. Whispers Behind the Green Curtain. Dawn broke over London in misty tendrils that curled along the rooftops and slipped through the alleys of Covent Garden. By 8 o'clock, Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings were again at the Marlowe Theatre, where the morning's rehearsal of the Scarlet Masquerade was due to commence. The stage door stood open, its worn brass, plate gleaming where dozens of hands, some theatrical, some simply curious, had left their fingerprints. Evelyn Harcourt met them in the foyer, still wearing last evening's morning face powder, her eyes shadowed by unrest. "Good morning, Monsieur Poirot," she greeted. "I trust Mr. Turner has slept well." "His condition is stable, madam, though not yet free of danger," Poirot replied. "I shall visit him shortly. But first, I wish to trace the origin of our poison." She led them into a corridor decorated with posters of flourishing box office successes. Every few yards, a half-dressed actor hurried past, lines of script in hand, or stagehands rolled scenery silently toward the wings. Poirot paused where a smear of green paint glinted on the wooden doorframe, exactly the shade of the backdrop. He traced the brushstroke with a gloved fingertip. "Note, Hastings, how carelessly this smear has been left," he murmured. "Our villain was in haste or overconfident." They reached the prop room, where a throng of curious onlookers had already gathered. Mrs. Selwyn, the prop master, hovered beside her workbench, each mask and prop laid out meticulously. At Poirot's request, she presented the silver mask Giles Turner had handled. Under his magnifying glass, Poirot detected the same green sediment at the edge, a microscopic residue that matched the backdrop glaze. "May I see your mask cleaning solutions?" he asked. Mrs. Selwyn led them to a shelf of canisters. Poirot held each tint and polish to the light, then produced his own small flask of distilled water. He dampened a cotton swab and wiped an untouched mask, no pigment. Next, he tested the suspect mask. "Aha," he said, "a faint streak remains even after your usual cleaning. Who last administered the glaze?" Mrs. Selwyn hesitated. "I entrusted the heavy plant dyes to Giles, as usual. I only handle the metallic powders, and I never use this green for masks." "Precisely," Poirot said, storing the flask. "It was an opportunity stolen, but we must probe further. I wish to see the costume department next." In the costume loft, racks of velvet gowns and tailored waistcoats hung beneath a lattice of skylights. The air smelled faintly of lavender sachets and damp wool. Here, the costume mistress, Miss Arbuthnot, offered them a cup of tea. "Every costume is laundered weekly," she explained, pouring. "Yet if poison clung to Turner's gloves, it would transfer swiftly." Poirot sniffed the tea and set it aside. Then he turned to her racks. "Miss Arbuthnot, might I examine your glove box?" She unlocked a walnut cabinet containing dozens of pears, theatre gloves of leather, cotton, lace, each labelled with initials. Poirot extracted a pair marked GT. "These are Turner's stage gloves, yes?" Miss Arbuthnot nodded. "He stowed them here each evening." He flexed at the leather, noting stiffness at the fingertips. "Here, the green smear I noted on the mask. Have these gloves been cleaned since the incident?" "We laundered all gloves after the fall," she said, "but I fear the leather hasn't lost its stain." Poirot placed Turner's gloves in a paper envelope. "We may confirm our theory. Whoever coated the mask also coated the gloves. Now, I must see the changing rooms." In the actors' changing room, personal lockers lined the walls. Hastings pointed out a cluster of footprints, wet scuffs of mud from the night's rain, leading from the garden door to the dressing table of Mr. Philip Grey, the masked stranger. Poirot knelt and examined the prints. Mud mixed with compost, perhaps from the Marlowe's rear garden, Poirot observed. "We must question the gardener." They retraced their steps through the wings, emerging at the garden entrance, a narrow courtyard cobbled with ivy and rose thickets. The gardener, Thomas Clemens, was hoeing a patch of foxglove at the far end. He looked up, wiping sweat from his brow. "Mr. Clemens," Poirot called. "A moment, please." The gardener set aside his tools. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, how may I assist?" "We require the foxglove clippings you harvested yesterday morning," Poirot said. "Digitalis glycosides, once dried, can be potent. To what purpose were these clipped?" Clemens blinked. "Miss March ordered a few stems for her dressing-room potpourri. She loves the scent." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Miss March, the leading lady?" "Yes, monsieur. She said it soothed her nerves." "Did you deliver them yourself?" "I did. I left them in a vase on her vanity table around 10 last night." "Can anyone else access your tools or the cut foxglove?" asked Hastings. Clemens shook his head. "No, the garden is locked after dusk. Only housekeeping and I have the key." Poirot tapped his moustache. "Then the foxglove stands as a potential source of digitalis, administered perhaps in tea, as we saw. But the antimony must come from Mrs. Selwyn's powder." He turned to Clemens. "Your boots appear mud-free now. Yet last night, did you pass through the wings?" The gardener hesitated. "I owed a stagehand a tobacco pipe. Giles asked me to bring it around to his corner. I slipped through while others were rehearsing." "That explains the footprints leading to Gray's dressing-room," Poirot said. "Now, one final interview with Mr. Philip Gray." They followed Clemens's path back inside. Gray, seated before a gilt mirror, was rehearsing lines in hushed intensity. He looked up at Poirot's arrival. "Monsieur, I understand you seek me." "Indeed," Poirot replied. "Your costume trousers bear a smear of green, presumably from Turner's glove wipe." Gray placed a hand over his leg. "Yes, he joked about it last night, but I cleaned my trousers immediately. I swear I've no more green upon me." Poirot knelt, ran a gentle swab across the fabric. A trace of pigment transferred. "Curious. Where were you between 8 and 9? "I was in the rehearsal studio with Miss March," Gray said. "We ran the second tableau repeatedly. I did not leave her side until the collapse." "Yet your boots show the same mud pattern as Mr. Clemens's." Poirot stood, studying Gray's expression. "Tell me, sir, when did you last see Giles Turner before he fell?" Philip's jaw tightened. "Moments before. I handed him the metal scaffold railing, a prop he repaired this morning, and then he said he felt unwell." Poirot nodded slowly. "A railing of iron that might absorb antimony powder." Gray flushed. "You insinuate I harmed him?" "Not yet," Poirot replied gently. "But your footprints and that pigment link you to the scene, and you had means: antimony in the mask dust, digitalis from the foxglove." He turned. "I thank you, sir." Leaving Gray in pensive silence, Poirot and Hastings retreated to a quiet dressing-room. Hastings lit his pipe. "Mon Dieu, Hercule, we have motive, means, and opportunity, but no confession." Poirot paced. "Yet the tip of the dagger lies in the motive. Giles Turner knew too much, Hastings, perhaps about illicit affairs, unpaid, debts among the company, or clandestine flirtations. Our murderer needed to silence him." "Rumours abound," Hastings agreed. "I heard whispers of a secret liaison between Miss March and Mr. Gray." Poirot tapped his moustaches. "Indeed, jealousy, fear of exposure, one strong enough to counsel poisoning a man." "We must test our suspect's reactions," he returned, "to the prop room where Mrs. Selwyn was arranging last night's glittering swords and goblets." Poirot drew aside Hastings. "Observe her right hand," Poirot said in a whisper. "She clutches something in her palm." Hastings peered. Mrs. Selwyn held a small vial concealed in her hand, an identical bottle to the one Poirot seized from her makeup kit. Poirot stepped forward. "Madame, a moment." He asked kindly, "May I see that vial, please?" Mrs. Selwyn paled. "This? It's merely my theatrical antimony, used for eyelash hardening. Yet last night it vanished from your kit." Poirot said calmly, "If used to bind digitalis to a brush, it would render the mask, our murder weapon, deadly." She trembled. I left the vial unattended for only a moment." He produced the empty canister from his pocket, and in that moment someone borrowed it. "Forgive me, madam, but I suspect you and one other." Her shoulders sagged. It was Miss Arbuthnot. She resented Turner for mocking her alterations to the costumes. Her confession spilled in a rush. "She came in, borrowed my antimony, claiming urgent need. I trusted her." Poirot nodded. "Then our plot thickens. We must confront Miss Arbuthnot before the matinee." They hurried to the costume loft, where Miss Arbuthnot sat mending a sleeve. Poirot produced the antimony canister. "Madame," he said, "you have used this to adulterate Mr. Turner's paint and mask. Your motive, wounded pride." She trembled with guilt. "He laughed at my work, said my stitches were amateurish. I wanted only to frighten him, not kill." He tapped his moustache. "Yet your panicked revenge needed Turner incapacitated. You mixed digitalis into the foxglove, then crushed antimony into the green glaze, so that every touch on stage sealed his fate. Mr. Gray's footprints and Miss March's involvement were misdirection." As she wept, the theatre manager ushered in Dr. Prentice, who confirmed the presence of both toxins on the mask and in Turner's bloodstream. Evelyn Harcourt addressed the small gathering. "I shall ensure that Miss Arbuthnot receives a fair trial. Mr. Turner is recovering, thanks to Dr. Prentice and to Monsieur Poirot." Poirot inclined his head. "Justice tempered by mercy, madame. Let this serve as a caution. Even the smallest grievance can spawn tragedy when masked by pride." That afternoon, backstage in the quiet wings, Poirot found Giles Turner reclining on a couch. Hastings sat nearby, offering tea. "Mon ami," Poirot said gently, "you are fortunate to live, and you have proof, the mask, the gloves, the vial." Turner's lips curved. "I owe you my life, Monsieur Poirot. I had no idea so much could hinge on a smear of paint." Poirot smiled. In theatre as in life, a small mark can change the entire scene. But now, with the culprit unmasked, the play may go on, and Turner, if he will, may choose a new part in its unfolding. As the company prepared for the matinee, the stagehands moved with renewed purpose. The green backdrop gleamed in the footlights, but no longer carried poison, only artistry. Outside the fog had lifted, and the late morning sun fell across the Marlowe's facade. Within, Poirot and Hastings took their seats among the gilt balconies. Hastings whispered, "Another case neatly tied, Hercule." Poirot sipped his tea. "Ah, Hastings, the theatre reminds us that every performance hides truths behind its masks, and that only by lifting them can we applaud the drama of justice." The curtain rose on the final rehearsal of the Scarlet Masquerade, and Poirot, content that justice had been served, allowed himself a rare moment of admiration for the spectacle. Art and life woven together in perfect illusion. Chapter 3. Shadows Among the Scenery. The Marlowe Theatre awoke the next morning with a hush that bordered on reverence. Word of Miss Arbuthnot's confession and Giles Turner's narrow escape had spread through the company by dawn. Yet rather than relieve tension, it seemed to sharpen every gaze and quicken every step. The cavernous wings, usually a hive of last-minute adjustments and whispered greetings, now bore an uneasy hush, as though the very beams and rigging watched in apprehension. Hercule Poirot arrived just after 9 o'clock, his walk deliberate, his little grey cells already sifting through the residues of the night's revelations. Hastings accompanied him, bearing fresh intelligence. A letter from Evelyn Harcourt, insisting that Poirot meet her in the manager's office at once. The corridor that led there was lined with tall mirrors, gaudy gold frames reflecting the two detectives as they passed, a silent reminder that in theatre appearances are everything. Evelyn Harcourt, still wearing the faintest trace of last night's makeup, rose from behind her desk and gestured them in. Papers and rehearsal schedules lay scattered upon the heavy oak surface, as though hurriedly abandoned. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she greeted with a nervous smile. "I must apologize for disturbing your morning, but another incident has arisen. Giles Turner claims to remember overhearing something just before he collapsed, which suggests that Miss Arbuthnot may not have acted alone." Poirot inclined his head, steepling his fingers. "Madame, truth often has layers beyond the surface confession. Pray, tell us what Mr. Turner recalls." The manager extended a trembling hand. He says that, in the dimness of the trapdoor passage beneath the stage, he caught two voices. One spoke in a harsh whisper, Miss Arbuthnot's, he believes, and another cooler, that he did not recognize. He thought a masculine tone, clipped and urgent. Hastings whistled softly. "So our plot grows deeper. An accomplice, perhaps, or a puppet master," Poirot mused. "We must speak with Mr. Turner while his memory is fresh." They ascended the staircase to the infirmary room, a repurposed rehearsal space where Turner lay under a blanket, eyes brightening as they entered. "Giles, you said you heard voices?" Poirot asked, taking the bed's edge. Turner drew a shaky breath. "Yes, monsieur. I was creeping toward the nurse's station trying to fetch water, when I heard Miss Arbuthnot arguing. I recognized her from earlier rehearsals, but the other voice, it said, 'Do it precisely before the matinee begins. We haven't much time.' Then a scuff of boots, and Miss Arbuthnot said, 'Very well.' After that, I called her name and she came, but I only remember a gust of powder scent. And then I grew dizzy." Poirot pressed a fingertip to his moustache. "Describe the voice." Turner's brow furrowed. Deep, clipped English, not Mr. Gray's gentle tone, nor Dr. Prentice's, something colder. "Thank you, mon ami," Poirot said. "Rest now. We shall find this second voice." Back in the manager's office, Hastings tapped his chin. "Who among the company speaks in such a tone? I can't think of many with access to the trapdoor." Evelyn Harcourt frowned. "Only the stage manager, Mr. Brand. He oversees all scene changes and often works below when we run props. He's calm, efficient, but I've never heard him raise his voice." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Let us see Mr. Brand, then." He rose. "Madame, please join us later. We may require your insight on company dynamics." They found Mr. Brand in the lighting gallery, perched among banks of dimming boards. He looked up, surprise and concern flashing in his eyes. "Monsieur Poirot," he greeted crisply. I hear there's been further complication. Mr. Brand, Poirot began. Did you visit the trapdoor area late last night? Brand's posture stiffened. Yes, I needed to reposition a cable that had frayed. I descended alone. He hesitated. I noticed a faint whispering. An argument. I paused, but the darkness and echoes made it difficult to discern words. I left quickly. Did you speak to Miss Arbuthnot afterward? Hastings asked. Brand shook his head. No, I assumed it was rehearsal banter. Poirot tapped his shoes together. Your voice, would it match the description Mr. Turner provided? Brand lifted an eyebrow. Perhaps. I speak plainly, without flourish. Then you are a prime candidate, Poirot said softly. Yet motive? Brand's jaw clenched. I liked Giles. He helped me test wiring. Why would I harm him? Power can be as potent a motive as envy, Poirot reminded him. You control the darkness, the cues. A man who threatened your timing could provoke rage. Brand stood, collecting himself. I did argue with Miss Arbuthnot about insufficient light on her stitching last week. But it was professional frustration, nothing more. Poirot inclined his head. I trust your cooperation. We shall consider your statement. As they left, Hastings muttered, A tangled web indeed. Oui, Poirot agreed, and no single confession suffices until all threads are revealed. They returned to the rehearsal hall, where the cast gathered for the matinee run. Helena March, radiant in her crimson gown, caught their eye from the stage. Miss March, Poirot called. She descended the steps gracefully. Monsieur Poirot, I hoped you'd join us, she said, voice hushed. Tell me, Poirot began, what did you feel upon touching the mask Mr. Turner passed you? Helena swirled in a half-curtsy. It was cold, damp. I thought it was stage makeup residue. But now, I wonder. You saw Miss Arbuthnot leave the trapdoor area. Helena's lips parted. Yes, I passed the wings just after midnight. I heard her voice raised, saying, He cannot interfere. Then another voice, deep and harsh. Precisely, Poirot said. And did you recognize that voice? Helena shook her head. No, but it was not Mrs. Selwyn's nor Mr. Brand's. It sounded male. Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings. We must widen our circle. I suspect someone from the orchestra pit, perhaps the conductor. They slipped into the pit, where musicians tuned violins and checked sheet music. The conductor, Mr. Stefano Ricci, a portly Italian with expressive hands, greeted them. Maestro Ricci, Poirot said, might I ask about your presence near the trapdoor last night? Ricci set down his baton. I was in late auditioning new brass players. I heard voices, so I stayed above. I did not descend. Yet one of your brass stands was moved, Hastings noted. We found it blocking the trapdoor. Ricci frowned. Curious. I did reposition stands, but not near the wings. Poirot walked to the trapdoor. The metal edge gleamed underfoot. A misplacement to foil Turner's escape for water, he said, or to conceal someone's passage. Hastings knelt to examine scuff marks. These boots, Italian pattern, size 7. Maestro, may I see your shoes? Ricci extended a polished pair. The sole matched the scuffs. He swallowed. I did go down, seeking rehearsal speed. I did not intend harm. Then another may have used your route, Poirot said. This plot involves multiple stages. Now, I wish to inspect the makeup room. In the cramped makeup area, Dr. Prentice worked over a sink of cleansing solution. Pipes rattled as he filled basins. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "any new theories?" "I believe our poison was applied in layers. First the foxglove infusion in Turner's tea, then antimony in the green paint, then a final coat in the mask dust," Poirot explained. "To what end? To ensure a singular, irreversible collapse." Dr. Prentice nodded. "A cunning design." Poirot lifted a cracked mirror. "Show me where you store your cleaning rack." The doctor complied. Bottles of mercury-based cleansers, disinfectants, tinctures. Poirot selected a vial of iodine. "Antidote for antimony, yes?" he asked. Dr. Prentice nodded. "I administered it this morning as treatment." "Then no further need of this kit," Poirot concluded. "Thank you, Doctor." As the matinee rehearsal began, Poirot and Hastings took seats in the stalls. The theatre filled with clicking heels and rustling script pages. "Mon ami," Hastings whispered, "the culprit hides in plain sight, moving through every department." Poirot sipped tea. "The key is motive, and the voice Turner heard. We must speak with one final person. The theatre's owner, Sir Reginald Marlowe." After the rehearsal, they found Sir Reginald in his private box, surveying the empty house with a satisfied smile. His tailored suit and silver hair bespoke wealth and authority. "Sir Reginald," Poirot said, bowing slightly, "a word, if you please." The baronet descended. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, what can I do?" "We are investigating an accomplice to Miss Arbuthnot's poisoning attempt," Poirot explained. Mr. Turner heard a second voice. He paused. "Your own?" Sir Reginald's eyes widened. "Mine? Absolutely not." "Yet you hold the purse strings," Poirot continued. "You approved Turner's pay raise. A secret you may have feared leaked. Did you meet with Miss Arbuthnot in the trapdoor area?" Sir Reginald's pallor deepened. "I was there, to settle a dispute about my box renovation. I did not see her, but I spoke in lowered tones to my architect. Perhaps you heard me." "Your voice, clipped, firm, correct?" Poirot pressed. He nodded. "Yes, but no poison talk." Poirot studied Sir Reginald. "Then our unknown conspirator borrowed your location as misdirection." Sir Reginald swallowed. "So you believe someone framed me?" Poirot inclined his head. "Indeed, but we still lack the final piece. Why Turner, specifically?" Sir Reginald hesitated. He discovered Miss March and Mr. Grey's affair. He intended to blackmail them, threatening exposure. Hastings whistled. "So they had motive indeed." Poirot smiled thinly. "But Grey was alibi-bound by rehearsal, and Helena feared ruin. The stage manager, Mr. Brand, feared downtime. All motives swirl. Yet only one individual had the opportunity, the poison knowledge, and the motive to strike swiftly." He turned to Sir Reginald. "And that is you, sir." Sir Reginald recoiled. "Me? I would never harm a man." Poirot tapped his moustache. "But you knew Miss Arbuthnot's grudge. You held the theatre's purse, and you sought to protect your mistress's reputation. You whispered instructions beneath the trapdoor, cloaked in the mask of night, and armed her with the vial." Sir Reginald sank. I did not intend death, only to stop Turner's blackmail. She confessed to me in desperation, and I provided the antimony. In her panic, she used the foxglove we gathered together. When Turner collapsed, I panicked and blamed her." Poirot's gaze was both gentle and firm. And so 2 lives were nearly lost. Yet confession and justice must now run their course. As constables arrived, Sir Reginald spoke quietly with Evelyn Harcourt, offering his resignation and awaiting inquiry. The company, shaken but relieved, prepared for the evening performance under Dr. Prentice's watchful eye and Hastings's reassuring presence. Back in the empty stalls, Poirot mused to Hastings. The theatre is a microcosm, artifice layered over truth. Here, the real drama lay not on stage, but in hidden passages of fear and betrayal. Hastings nodded. And our little grey cells have revealed the actors behind the masks. Poirot strolled to the centre of the stage, surveying the empty auditorium with satisfaction. Now, Hastings, let us watch the final act. For tonight, the Scarlet Masquerade will open, its players restored, its audience none the wiser of the shadows that once threatened its wings. As the footlights warmed and the orchestra tuned, Poirot settled into his seat, confident that justice had taken its bow, and that the curtain could finally rise on truth. Chapter 4. Secrets in the Ledger, the Marlowe Theatre. Fresh from last night's, dramatic revelations seemed both smaller and infinitely more labyrinthine to Hercule Poirot the following morning. Word of Sir Reginald Marlowe's involvement had spread swiftly. Some murmured outrage, others sympathy. But under it all lay a current of unsettled questions. The company carried on towards the matinee opening of the Scarlet Masquerade, yet every exchange bore a subtle edge of anxiety. Poirot arrived before dawn, accompanied by Captain Hastings, to inspect the theatre's accounts and private offices. Hastings had remarked on the peculiar swiftness of Sir Reginald's confession. Something in his manner suggested a scapegoat rather than a true culprit. Poirot, ever sensitive to the slightest tremor of human emotion, had felt the same disquiet. They entered the manager's office just as Evelyn Harcourt arrived, clutching a small satchel. Her steps faltered when she saw Poirot and Hastings already there. "Monsieur Poirot," she stammered, "I thought you—" "I wished first to review the theatre's ledgers," Poirot said gently. "May we?" She nodded and stepped aside, revealing a marble-topped desk piled with dust-covered journals. Poirot removed his gloves and opened the top volume, scanning the entries with his sharp, deliberate gaze. "Notice, Hastings," he murmured, "that the box-office receipts for the past month do not correspond with the sums deposited. There is a weekly shortfall of approximately £30. Hastings peered over his friend's shoulder. "So, someone has been siphoning funds." "Precisely. And Giles Turner, our injured stagehand, handled nightly receipts en route to the safe. He discovered the discrepancies and threatened to expose them." Evelyn's face paled. "Gilles? He would never—" Poirot cut her off. "He would indeed, madam. In fact, his agitation before the poisoning concerned this very matter. Now let us see who had motive to silence him." He flipped pages until a series of entries caught his eye. Payments to an unsigned vendor, listed simply as studio repairs. The numbers, rounded and tidy, masked the true amounts spent. "Madame, who made these repairs?" Poirot asked. She swallowed. The backstage machinery needed overhaul. Lighting rigs, trapdoors, the like. Sir Reginald authorized them. "The sums seem excessive," Poirot observed. "We must trace these invoices." He closed the ledger and stood, May we have access to your safe keys?" Evelyn handed them over. Poirot opened the heavy iron safe, revealing envelopes of banknotes and more journals. He produced the vendor invoices, noting a single signature scrawled beneath each. "E.H. Evelyn Harcourt," he said softly. Her eyes darted to Hastings. "There must be an explanation." Poirot held up a slender volume he found tucked in the back. A private cash book bearing Evelyn's initials. Inside, payments from the box office were immediately funneled into personal expenses, jewellery, tailored gowns, and payments to the costume department far exceeding the theatre's usual outlays. "Madame," Poirot said with solemn courtesy, "these entries reveal that you have been diverting funds for your private benefit, using Giles Turner's oversight to mask the theft. When he discovered your embezzlement, you enlisted Miss Arbuthnot, and perhaps others, to poison him." Evelyn's composure unravelled. She sank into the manager's chair, burying her face in trembling hands. "I only wanted to save my failing investments. But Giles insisted on telling Sir Reginald. He threatened my position and the theatre's reputation." Hastings's voice softened. "And Sir Reginald took the blame to protect you?" She nodded through tears. "He loved me, though I didn't deserve it. When Giles collapsed, sir, Reginald confessed to spare me scandal." Poirot removed his gloves and seated himself across from her. "Madame, justice demands accountability. But your remorse speaks volumes. You will face the magistrate, yet I trust his judgment will consider these extenuating circumstances." She bowed her head. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot." With the truth laid bare, Poirot and Hastings left the office. Hastings exhaled, running his hand through his hair. So, our true culprit was the theatre manager all along. But what of Miss Arbuthnot and Sir Reginald? Both were unwitting accomplices in a tragedy that began with greed. Poirot replied, "We must now arrange for their confessions to be formalized." They descended to the foyer, where Giles Turner, pale but recovering, waited anxiously. Poirot placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Giles, your courage in recalling the ambushed voices has led us here. Thanks to you, the theatre's poison may be cleansed at its root." Turner nodded, relief etched on his features. At noon, Evelyn Harcourt, escorted by constables, gave her formal statement at the magistrate's office. Sir Reginald, standing by her side, whispered words of support. Miss Arbuthnot, awaiting her fate, accepted responsibility for applying the antimony, weeping for her betrayal of trust. The theatre's company gathered outside the court, offering silent solidarity. That evening, the Marlowe's stagehands carefully removed any traces of last week's drama. A fresh coat of green paint gleamed on the backdrop. The silver masks were polished spotless, and the trap-door beneath the wings was secured. The Marquis announced the grand matinee of the Scarlet Masquerade, yet tonight's performance carried a weight of sober triumph. The company had survived both deadly intrigue and moral collapse. Poirot and Hastings took their seats in the front row. Hastings leaned in. "A happy ending, no?" Poirot smiled. "A theatre must hold many truths. On stage, the story we present. Off stage, the human dramas we endure. Here, the final act reminded us that pride, love, and desperation can poison more than tea, but in the end candour and compassion prevail. The orchestra began. The curtain rose, and the scarlet masquerade unfolded under footlights once more, its players free to tell their tale, now that the real villain had been unmasked. Chapter 5. Curtain Call for Truth the day after Evelyn Harcourt's confession and Sir Reginald Marlowe's accompanying admission. A tense stillness settled over the Marlowe Theatre. In the early morning light, the great red velvet curtain hung motionless on its rail, a silent testament to the drama that had played out off stage. Hercule Poirot arrived before dawn, accompanied as ever by Captain Hastings, to observe the final preparations for the afternoon's performance of the Scarlet Masquerade. Word had spread quickly that the theatre, once tainted by poison and embezzlement, would reopen under new management and with several key players absent. Yet, despite the upheaval, a fierce determination flared in the faces of the remaining company. They would not allow their art to be eclipsed by scandal. Poirot and Hastings made their way through the hushed corridors, past prop tables and costume racks. A handful of stagehands replaced the silver masks, scrubbed clean to remove every trace of green sediment and antimony. The backstage walls, once scrawled with last night's chalked stage directions, had been washed and repainted. Even the trapdoor beneath the wings was newly oiled and tested by the stage manager, his expression grave but resolute. In the green room, now repainted a crisp cream to expunge the memory of Arbor Green, actresses and actors sipped tea and rehearsed lines under harsh daylight tubes. Helena March, the lead in Crimson, greeted Poirot with a small, weary smile. Though her role had been at the centre of the plot's misdirection, she bore no resentment. Instead, her appreciation for Poirot's careful unravelling of the conspiracy shone in her eyes. "Monsieur Poirot, we are indebted to you," she said softly, handing him a cup. "Without your intervention, this theatre might have closed forever." Poirot inclined his head graciously. "It is you and your fellow performers who have shown courage. I merely held a mirror to truths already present." Hastings, ever the companionable soul, raised his cup to her, and I shall toast the first performance under our restored spotlight. Before they could linger, Miss Arbuthnot, the costume mistress, approached with measured steps. Her hands trembled as she carried a small bundle of embroidered threads, the last remnants of her own handiwork that had once contributed to the masked poison plot. She offered them to Poirot. "Monsieur," she murmured, "I wish to atone. These were the stitches on the gloves Turner wore that day. With your permission, I'd like them laid upon the stage as a token of remorse." Poirot studied the fine workmanship and nodded gently. "Your wish is noble. Let your skill now serve as a symbol of renewal, rather than vengeance." She bowed, and Hastings guided her to a corner where she might gather herself before the performance. Across the room, Joseph Clemens, the gardener, arranged a bouquet of foxglove flowers in a porcelain pitcher, plucked with trepidation, yet now destined to symbolize both hurt and healing. He turned as Poirot approached. "Sir," Clemens said, voice hushed, "the flowers are for the foyer, to greet guests with honesty rather than the dread they once inspired." Poirot nodded his approval. "Very good, my friend. Nature offers both beauty and danger. Teach the truth of both to your audience." At precisely 1 o'clock, Evelyn Harcourt, escorted by her solicitor, arrived to hand over the theatre's keys to Lady Arabella Bramwell's nephew, Edward Bramwell, a distant cousin and recently appointed provisional manager. The handover took place in the office bays under Poirot's calm gaze, ensuring that no further irregularities remained in the safe. Evelyn's eyes, red-rimmed but resolute, met Poirot's. "Thank you for your discretion, monsieur," she said. "I shall face the magistrate, but I regret only that my actions nearly cost another his life." Poirot's aquamarine gaze was both compassionate and steadfast. "Acceptance of responsibility is the first step toward redemption, madam. May your contrition guide you back to honest endeavour." Edward Bramwell stepped forward, his crisp morning suit immaculate. "I pledge to honour the theatre's legacy. No secrets, no misappropriations. Only art and fellowship." With that pledge echoing through the panelled walls, the keys changed hands. Poirot and Hastings departed the office and moved towards the main entrance, where the matinee audience was already lining up in eager anticipation. Outside, cab drivers doffed their caps to the newcomers. Curious passers-by peered through the foyer windows at the transformed interior. And a fresh poster proclaimed, in bold letters, the afternoon's premiere under the heading "A New Dawn at the Marlowe." Inside the auditorium, the first rows filled quickly. Hastings settled into his usual seat, bowing to the usher. Poirot took his seat beside him, his posture regal, his little grey cells poised for final reflection. The air hummed with expectancy. The velvet seat smelled faintly of powder and wood polish. At precisely 2:00, the house lights dimmed and the overture swelled. The orchestra, under Maestro Ricci's baton, played with renewed fervour. Far above, in the lighting gallery, Mr. Brand manipulated the cues with delicate precision. From the pit to the wings, every move was flawless. The first scene unfolded. The masked stranger glided into the moonlit courtyard, encountering the heroine beneath a painted arch. On stage and off, the company moved as one, their shared ordeal knitting them tighter than before. During the second tableau, when the masked figure removes his silver visage to reveal his face, a single spotlight illuminated Helena March's features. Poirot watched as she turned to Philip Grey, portraying anguish and defiance in perfect unison. Grey, too, brought depth to his performance, the memory of his own entanglement in the conspiracy only adding to his sincerity. As intermission neared, Poirot whispered to Hastings, "Observe how each actor invests their pain into the performance. This theatre has become a crucible, forging bonds of trust." Hastings nodded, eyes bright, and the audience, unaware of the real drama, remains enthralled by the illusion. During the brief pause, Poirot slipped backstage to ensure Miss Arbuthnot's embroidered threads had been laid on the trapdoor perimeter, where a small plaque now read, "In memory of the lessons learned, skill must serve compassion." Hichidunfu found her kneeling nearby, tears in her eyes as she gazed at the tribute. "Mistress Arbuthnot," he said gently, "you have woven atonement into this theatre's fabric. Take solace in that." She rose, offering him a fragile smile. "Merci, Monsieur Poirot. I shall never forget." Back in the stalls, Hastings found him ready for the second half. The curtain rose once more, scenes blurring between tragic romance and whispered intrigue and the final acts unfolded with dramatic precision. When the climax arrived, where the heroine faintly collapses at the lover's feet, the company held the audience in rapt silence before the final bow. Then the curtain descended and applause thundered like a storm. Poirot and Hastings stood, joining the standing ovation. The performers emerged, faces alight with relief and pride. Evelyn Harcourt, seated in the patron's box, offered Sir Reginald's restored title a gracious nod. Sir Reginald, released on recognizance and free to witness the triumph, returned, her gesture with solemn gratitude. Edward Bramwell, overseeing from the wings, allowed himself a modest smile at the theatre's revival. Even Miss Arbuthnot and Joseph Clemens shared a quiet embrace, their shared guilt and healing now reborn in creativity. After the curtain calls, Hastings turned to Poirot. What a perfect redemption arc, both on stage and off. The theatre lives again. Poirot tapped his moustache thoughtfully. Art imitates life, Hastings, and sometimes corrects it. Here, the final act of deception gave way to an encore of fidelity. Backstage, Evelyn Harcourt approached Poirot one last time, accompanied by Dr. Prentice, who had just completed his rounds with the actors and crew. "Monsieur Poirot," Evelyn said, her voice steadier, "I cannot thank you enough. You restored not only my reputation, but the spirit of this theatre." He inclined his head. "Madam, remember that trust is fragile. Guard it always with openness. May the Marlowe flourish under honest stewardship," Dr. Prentice interjected with a wry smile. "I shall prescribe less deadly remedies in future." Poirot allowed a small grin. "As shall we all?" Night had fallen by the time Poirot and Hastings stepped onto the deserted pavement of the West End. Hastings tucked his scarf against the chill. "Another case closed, Hercule." Poirot paused to look back at the Marlowe Theatre's lit marquee. The Scarlet Masquerade. A new dawn. The glow bathed the sidewalk in rose-gold warmth. In that moment, Poirot spoke with quiet conviction. A theatre is forever poised between illusion and reality. Here we faced the poison of avarice and the poison of revenge. Yet by unmasking deceit, we allowed compassion, honesty, and art to triumph. This house will now belong not to secrets, but to shared exhilaration. Its next act is up to those who truly love the stage. Hastings smiled as they walked down Shaftesbury Avenue. "Mon Dieu, Hercule, your words are always so finely crafted." Poirot tapped his moustache. "Think of them as one more final note in a grand symphony, Hastings. And in every symphony, the sweetness of the last chord lingers longest. Together they strolled into the London night, leaving the Marlowe Theatre proud and whole behind them, its story a testament to the power of truth, whose curtain call echoes in every whispered confession and every resounding applause. Chapter 6. Echoes of Misplaced Trust. The Marlowe Theatre, having weathered scandal and near tragedy, now stood on the precipice of its first full week under new stewardship. Edward Bramwell, newly installed manager, paced the corridors with brisk determination, determined that no further spectres of mistrust would haunt the boards. Yet beneath the marquee's cheerful lights and the freshly painted stage, an undercurrent of tension stirred, an echo of the past reminding every member of the company that complacency invites disaster. It was on the morning of the second evening performance that the trouble first flared. Poirot arrived shortly before noon, summoned by a frantic telegram from Edward Bramwell. As he and Hastings entered the manager's sparsely furnished office, Bramwell looked up, his face drawn. "Monsieur Poirot," Bramwell said, voice tight, "we have a crisis. The lighting rig malfunctioned during tonight's dress rehearsal, causing a chandelier to sway dangerously above the audience seats. No one was hurt, but it could have been fatal, and there are whispers of sabotage." Poirot inclined his head. "Show me the rig room." They traversed the dimmer-lit corridors behind the stage, arriving at the grid above the auditorium. Technicians hovered over banks of levers, their faces pale in the glow of amber floodlights. Moments earlier, a mechanic's test head sent the chandelier swinging at a perilous angle, forcing an immediate evacuation. The stage manager, Mr. Brand, led them up the narrow ladder. He pointed to a frayed cable near the pulley mechanism. "This cable should have held firm," he said, "yet it was nearly cut through. By a blade or coarse abrasion." Hastings peered at the cable. Such precise damage could only be deliberate. "Indeed," Poirot agreed. "This is no accident. But tell me, Brand, who had access to the rig room overnight?" Brand consulted a logbook. "Only the lighting crew, Mr. Ricci's musicians, who sometimes help rope, and Mrs. Cartwright's maintenance team." "Very good," Poirot said. "We shall question them in turn. But first I wish to see the maintenance records." They descended to the lower hall and found Mrs. Cartwright by the broom closet. She wiped her hands on her apron, her expression both apologetic and resolute. "Madam," Poirot began, "last night's maintenance log shows you inspected only the stage floor and trapdoor. You did not enter the rig room. Is that correct?" She nodded. "Yes, monsieur. I trust Mr. Sanders, the electrician, to check the lights. I deal only with cleaning and props. Then we shall speak with Mr. Sanders," Poirot said. "But first, Hastings, note that the frayed cable bears fine metal shavings, a tool of some sophistication." He examined the pulley housing, then stood. Their first visit was to the electrical workshop, where Mr. Samuel Sanders hunched over wiring diagrams. He looked up, startled. "Mr. Sanders, did you inspect the chandelier rig last evening?" Poirot asked. Sanders swallowed. "Yes, routine check. I found no fault. The cable was new last week. Only this morning did I see the fraying." "Who else handles these cables?" Hastings prompted. "No one but me and the assistant electrician, Tom Whitlock," Sanders replied. "He's here now." They found Whitlock polishing lantern lenses. The young man shifted nervously beneath Poirot's steady gaze. "Tom," Poirot said gently, "did you enter the rig room after hours?" Whitlock stammered. I needed to retrieve a drop cloth, but I swear I didn't touch the cable." Poirot pointed to the metal shavings. "These shavings match your files." "Teeth, Tom. A slip could cause this mark. But why remove so little material unless you meant harm?" Whitlock's shoulders shook. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I argued with Giles Turner yesterday. Overpay. He laughed when I asked for overtime. In a fit of rage, I scratched at the cable. I never thought anyone would be underneath at the next rehearsal." Hastings frowned. So you confess to sabotage, though unintentional. Yes, Whitlock whispered. I just wanted to scare him. To ruin his scene. I didn't know the chandelier would swing. Poirot studied him. Your motive sprang from anger, Tom, but you lacked the resolve to kill, yet confession demands its price. They escorted Whitlock to the foyer, where he awaited the constables. Edward Bramwell thanked Poirot gravely. Another life endangered, Bramwell said, but at least we avoid tragedy this time. Indeed, Poirot replied. However, we ought to verify that no other malice brews in the shadows. That afternoon, Poirot and Hastings settled into the stalls to observe final preparations, the orchestra tuned beneath Ricci's baton. Along the side wall, Higgins, the prompter, checked cues. Above, the stagehands tested new automated lighting. But Poirot's keen eye noted the unfamiliar presence of a spare technician, Mr. Alistair Gray, recently hired to update the digital controls. During the scene change between Acts 2 and 3, Hastings pointed, Note that technician behind the console. He seems too observant. Poirot nodded. Let us question him after the run. After the rehearsal, they found Mr. Gray near the control panel, sipping coffee. Poirot approached with quiet courtesy. Mr. Gray, he began, you have overseen the new lighting system for 2 nights. Do you know of any weaknesses in the mechanical rig? Gray smiled thinly. I built my career on electronics, not pulley cables. But the system you have here is antiquated. Wires and the odd copper cable. A determined hand could weaken it unnoticed. Have you worked with Mr. Sanders or Mr. Whitlock? Poirot asked. No, Gray said. I was brought in only this week. Then how did you learn of the sabotage? Hastings pressed. Gray's smile faded. I read the morning report. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have adjustments to make. Poirot watched him leave, then turned to Hastings. Something about him does not sit well, yet no direct accusation, only suspicion. Perhaps, Hastings conceded, but focus, Hercule. We have confession from Whitlock. That may suffice. Poirot smiled faintly. Yet I never rest until the final piece rests in place. Now, Hastings, let us speak with Maestro Ricci. They located Ricci in his dressing room, humming an aria into his mirror. He looked startled when Poirot entered. Maestro, Poirot said softly, during last night's practice, did you descend into the pit to inspect lighting? Ricci lowered his reflection. Yes, I wished to adjust the footlights' spacing, but I stayed near the front of the orchestra, not beneath the chandelier. Yet your baton's rubber tip fell to the rig-room floor, Poirot continued, producing it. Found between the frayed cables. Ricci's eyes widened. That is mine, but I could not have damaged the cable. Perhaps not, Poirot agreed, but you placed yourself near the mechanism, and when you discovered the damage, you could choose silence or confession. Ricci recoiled. Monsieur, I had motive, fear of my lighting cues being blamed on my direction. But I would never endanger lives. Hastings, Poirot said after. Ricci hastily excused himself. The maestro's tip was near the damage, but motive and means point to Whitlock. The others are red herrings, plausible yet deflecting blame. Hastings exhaled. So Whitlock stands alone. Oui, Poirot replied, but our work remains, to ensure he faces consequences with the knowledge that his regret was sincere. That at evening, Edward Bramwell announced the matinee would proceed, dedicating the performance to the resilience of the company and the restoration of safety. Poirot and Hastings took their seats as the house lights dimmed. Moments before the curtain rose, Bramwell appeared at the footlights, voice steady. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "this performance of the Scarlet Masquerade is offered in honor of the Marlowe's enduring spirit. We pay special tribute to the technician who came forward with truth, preserving lives through confession." Across the stage, a hush fell. Poirot recognized Whitlock standing in the wings, head bowed, yet dignified. The audience, unaware of his crime, erupted into applause at Bramwell's words. Applause mingled with a curious solemnity. As the performance unfolded, every footfall, every cue rang clear. The rig-room fraying had been repaired. The chandelier stood motionless. The company, galvanized by crisis and resolution, poured renewed energy into each line and gesture. Between scenes, Hastings leaned in. "What a triumph! Even our culprit now finds redemption in the spotlight." Poirot nodded. Truth, when embraced, becomes a beacon, Hastings, and tonight every actor follows its light. When the final curtain fell, the audience rose in thunderous acclamation. The cast, including Whitlock, took their bows, united in a chorus of relief and pride. Backstage, Poirot found Whitlock being consoled by Dr. Prentice. "Monsieur Whitlock," Poirot said kindly, "your confession spared a life, and many tragedies yet unborn. Your punishment will be tempered by your honesty and the service you rendered thereafter." The young man nodded through tears. "I will spend my life making amends." Poirot placed a supportive hand on his shoulder. "Then you have begun your redemption." As the company celebrated in the green room with tea and champagne, Poirot and Hastings slipped away to the empty auditorium. The chandelier above gleamed like a silent sentinel, its polished crystal prisms reflecting memory of danger and the promise of vigilance. Hastings turned to Poirot. Another near calamity, and yet truth prevailed. Poirot looked around the empty theatre, breathing in the hush. "Indeed, Hastings, the Marlowe has learned that trust must be earned and continually guarded. Let this night be remembered not for fear, but for the courage of one young man who chose to speak, rather than let lives hang by a frayed cable." They left at the theatre together, the glow of the marquee receding behind them. Outside, the cool, night air carried distant laughter and the faint strains of a violin concerto, a reminder that in London's constant performance, every soul carries a part to play in the grand drama of life. Chapter 7. A Spark in the Scenery Loft. The morning sun had barely climbed above the rooftops of Covent Garden when the Marlowe Theatre's stagehands discovered the faint smell of smoke drifting from the scenery loft. Word spread swiftly through the house. A small fire had broken out among the painted flats and storage crates overnight. No one was hurt, but the charred timbers and singed canvas threatened both the evening's performance and the safety of the entire company. Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings arrived by 10 o'clock, guided through the stage door by a grim-faced Mrs. Cartwright. The once pristine loft, an attic space crammed with unfinished backdrops, coiled rope and stacks of lumber, looked in disarray. Burn marks ringed the base of a newly painted forest scene, and a puddle of extinguishing water pooled near a ladder. Mon Dieu! Hastings muttered, surveying the damage. This could have brought the whole theatre down. Mrs. Cartwright clasped Poirot's hand. I found the blaze just after dawn, monsieur. Thankfully, some of the junior hands smelled the smoke before it spread. We extinguished it quickly, but the flats— She gestured to the blackened edges. They'll need replastering and repainting. Poirot knelt by the largest, charred panel. He touched the scorched wood with a gloved fingertip. Observe, Hastings. The fire was contained to a single spot. It did not spread naturally across the canvas. Rather, it sprang into flame from this point. He pointed to a neat circular burn, smaller than a teacup in diameter. A chemical accelerant, no doubt. Whoever did this intended rapid ignition. Hastings peered at the mark. It's almost too neat, Hercule, like someone calibrated the burn. Indeed. Poirot rose and surveyed the cluttered space. And see here, an empty metal tin, its label removed, lies atop that crate. He held up the tin, inspecting its edges. Originally, it held lamp oil or linseed varnish, a flammable substance. But someone has removed the label to mask its contents. Our arsonist prepared this in advance. Mrs. Cartwright dabbed at her eyes. Who would do such a thing? This theatre is our family. Precisely, Poirot said, and the offence is personal. We must determine who had motive to harm the company, and means to access this loft at night. They began by questioning the night watchman, Mr. Giles Harper, recently pardoned and recalled to service as Inspector of Feathers and Fires. He stood by the stairwell, coat draped over his arm. Monsieur Harper, Poirot said, you discovered the fire. Harper nodded gravely. Yes, monsieur, I do my rounds every 2 hours. Last night at midnight, I checked this area, found all secure. When I returned at 3, the smell of smoke drew me here. Did you see anyone leaving the loft? Hastings asked. No, Harper replied. But I noticed footprints in the dust. 2 sets. 1 large boot and 1 smaller shoe. They led to that trapdoor, and then vanished. Poirot studied the trapdoor frame. Then our suspect used the same secret passage Turner used, though unknown to many. We must examine those footprints more closely. He knelt, brushing aside stray sawdust, and exposed 2 prints, a heavy Wellington boot and a delicate ballet slipper sole. Odd combination. Notice the ballerina sole, Poirot said, pointing. Who among us owns such shoes? Only our dancing. Chorus and the ballet mistress, Miss Lorraine Vale. Hastings raised an eyebrow. Our theatre isn't hosting a ballet, only dramatic scenes. Yet Miss Vale conducts the choruses in the masquerade ball sequence. She keeps her slippers here. Exactly, Poirot said, and the Wellington suggests someone in heavier footwear, perhaps one of the stagehands assigned to loft access. The combination implies complicity, collaboration between 2. They thanked Harper and descended to the chorus room, where Miss Vale greeted them with pale composure. She stood beside a rack of costumes, her slender hands folded over her black tunic. Miss Vale, Poirot began, you keep a pair of satin ballet slippers in the scenery loft. She answered with polite firmness. Only when we rehearse the masked waltz. Otherwise, my slippers remain in my dressing room. Yet last night your prints appeared alongside those of a boot, Poirot said quietly. Tell me, where were you between 10 and midnight? Miss Vale's chin lifted. I was at home, practicing choreography. I did not return to the theatre. After rehearsal, who can confirm your whereabouts? Hastings asked. My landlady, Mrs. Brentwood, Miss Vale said. She admitted me at 10:30 and did not see me again until morning. Poirot nodded. We shall verify that. Meanwhile, our next step is to question the ballet mistress's assistant, Miss Talbot. They found Emily Talbot in the parlour, reviewing script revisions. She looked startled to see them. Miss Talbot, Poirot said gently, we need to ask about your slippers. My slippers? She repeated, confusion flickering. I don't have ballet slippers. Poirot produced a pastel pink slipper, the matching pair to Miss Vale's, dusty and stained. Emily paled. That's my sister Lily's, she whispered. She tries on costumes sometimes, but she wouldn't go to the loft at night. Hastings frowned. Your niece wears them. Emily nodded. Yes, Lily loves to dance among the scenery when alone. Last night she had a rehearsal in her head. She sneaked back late after a moonlight walk in the garden. Then Lily's prints explain the ballet slipper, Poirot said. Yet her footprints vanish elsewhere. She could not have been partner to the boot prints in the loft. That Wellington boot belongs to someone else. Emily's eyes widened. The stagehand's boots are kept in the yard, under lock. Who has key access? Poirot asked. Only the head of carpentry, Mr. Hose and Giles Harper, though he uses his own key line, Emily said. Hastings exhaled. Giles denies involvement in the fire, so Mr. Jose remains suspect. They hurried to the carpentry workshop at the back of the theatre. There, sawdust and wood shavings littered the floor, and a heavy Wellington boot stood by a lathe. Mr. Edward Hose, a burly man with coal-black hair and stern demeanour, looked up from his chiselling. Mr. Hose, Poirot began, what can you tell me of last night's events? Jose shrugged. I left at 8, as instructed. I lock up the boots and tools, then go home. I returned at 8 this morning. Yet a Wellington print matching your boot was found beside the trapdoor, Poirot said. Jose's jaw tightened. Someone played a prank, anything to delay the performance. I had nothing to do with arson. Poirot motioned to the lathe. Your boots still show sawdust, but no scorch. However, I notice a new tent-shaped shaving box. No label. Have you changed your equipment? Jose eyed the box. That belongs to Mr. Sanders. He borrowed my old rasp and left this behind in exchange. Then we observe a pattern of exchanged tools and subterfuge, Poirot said. But our arsonist wielded a chemical accelerant, someone familiar with theatre paints. That points back to Mrs. Selwyn's domain, the prop room. They completed their circuit by interrogating Mrs. Selwyn, whose prop area looked untouched. Yet Poirot noted one inconsistency. A tin of scenic varnish, its surface still wet, bore a fresh indentation as though recently opened. Madame, Poirot said, this varnish, who used it last? She frowned. I mixed a custom glaze for the masked ball scene yesterday afternoon. I stored the tin here. I did not return last night, yet the accelerant you use for varnishing would readily ignite, Poirot observed, and your space is the only one containing fresh varnish on the premises. Mrs. Selwyn paled. I use it only by day. I would never endanger lives. Nevertheless, you had motive, Poirot said softly. You resented the new management's cost-cutting. You saw the charred paint as an opportunity to protest. She shook her head. No, But I see who did. It was not me." Poirot turned to Hastings. "We have danced through every department until we consider the most subtle suspect, the conductor, Maestro Ricci." They rejoined Ricci in the orchestra pit, where he quietly tuned his violin. Hastings whispered, "He's the only one we haven't revisited," though Ricci swore he never descended to the rig. Poirot raised his voice. "Maestro, may I ask about your afternoon schedule yesterday?" Ricci lowered his instrument. "I was in rehearsal until 6, then I dined at an inn on Drury Lane. Witnesses at the bar can confirm." Poirot's brow furrowed. "Yet your stoic persona and access to the pit make you ideal for oversight, if not direct action. But I find you uninvolved. Our arsonist is someone who moves freely between departments. Like our junior technician, Mr. Alistair Gray." Hastings nodded. "He has the tech skills to handle digital systems and easily borrows solvents from the paint loft." Poirot returned to the rig-room floor, where Gray had been seen entering with a clipboard. He summoned Gray to stand beside him. "Mr. Gray, last night you had occasion to test the fire safety systems, did you not?" Poirot asked. Gray looked startled. "Yes, I ran a drill for the sprinklers, with permission from management." Poirot gestured to the faint corrosion around the sprinkler nozzle. "Corrosion suggests heavy chemical exposure, antimony or varnish residue. Your drill would have dislodged any build-up, yet the sprinkler nearest the burn did not activate." "Care to explain?" Gray's face fell. "The alarm panel malfunctioned. I intended to recalibrate the flow. I never thought the cable would burn so quickly." "Then you inadvertently disabled safety," Poirot said. "Your drill loosened the valve at the wrong moment, preventing water flow." Gray sank. "I wanted to improve safety, but instead I doomed it." Poirot's gaze was firm. "Your error endangers lives, Mr. Gray. You will rectify this immediately, install new valves, and ensure all rig cables are inspected daily." Gray nodded. "Yes, monsieur, at once." Poirot released him and turned to Hastings. "We have found our culprit, inadvertent but guilty of negligence. Yet among all these intrigues, the true poison was misplaced trust, from theft, sabotage to arson. The theatre's fate rests now on unity and vigilance." That evening, the chandelier swung stably as the company took their places. Pipes, cables, and varnished drums had been relocated to secure storage. Mrs. Cartwright oversaw nightly lockups, and every key was inventoried. Miss Vale and Emily Talbot tested their own slipper prints for safe passage. Shirt pockets were emptied, gloves accounted, and every department pledged to watch each other's work. Poirot and Hastings took their seats for the fourth performance. Hastings leaned in. "I never thought a theatre could host so many acts of treachery." Poirot tapped his moustache. "The theatre is a microcosm, Hastings, the stage of human passions. Our task as detectives is to illuminate the dark wings, so that art may proceed without peril." The overture rose. Under footlights and rigging, every player gave their all. And as the final curtain fell that night, the Marlowe flashed its marquee in brazen announcement, "The Scarlet Masquerade. Stronger in spirit." In the shadows, Poirot allowed himself a small smile. Truth had, once again, saved the show. Chapter 8. The Whisper of the Phantom Cue. The audience's applause still reverberated through the Marlow Theatre when a sudden blackout plunged the stage into darkness. It was during the pivotal masked ball scene of the Scarlet Masquerade. Candles flickering at first, then guttering out one by one, until the great chandelier overhead hung motionless, unlit like a fallen star. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few startled shrieks echoed in the stalls. Moments later, the emergency lights flicked on, revealing actors frozen mid-step and the prompter's book tossed onto the marble floor. Hercule Poirot, seated in his accustomed front-row seat, rose calmly. Beside him, Captain Hastings steadied a young usher with a reassuring hand. The theatre manager, Edward Bramwell, hurried onto the stage, lantern in hand, his face pale beneath the stage makeup's crimson glow. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bramwell called out, voice firm, "please remain calm. We apologize for the technical failure. We will restore light and resume shortly." A hush fell as stagehands scrambled up the aisles, lanterns in hand. Poirot slipped off his seat, nodding to Hastings, and made his way backstage. Hastings joined him, murmuring, "Another sabotage, Hercule, this time to disrupt the final performance." Poirot's moustaches twitched. "Nous verrons. The question is, who switched the cues, and why?" They ascended a narrow staircase to the lighting gallery, where Mr. Brand, the stage manager, stood before a row of switch panels. His usual composure wavered as he flicked levers in vain. "Can't get a single lamp to respond," Brand muttered. "The circuits are dead." Poirot approached the control board. "May I?" Brand stepped aside. Poirot inspected the fuses. One key fuse was missing, another blown. The panel's wiring harness had been tampered with. Several transformers unbolted, their leads loose. "No accident," Poirot concluded, replacing a fresh fuse Hastings procured. When the lights flicked on, Brand exhaled. "But this delay cost us half the scene." "Who had access overnight?" Poirot asked. Brand consulted the security log. "Only the lighting crew and the electrician, Mr. Sanders, plus Mr. Gray, our technician, who was installing the new digital dimmers." Poirot nodded. "We shall question them in turn." He descended to the curtained wings, where a cluster of technicians gathered. Sanders, bleary-eyed, held a coil of spare cable. Gray hovered nearby, checking his tablet. "Mr. Sanders," Poirot began, "did you inspect these circuits last night?" Sanders ran a hand through his hair. "Yes, I tested every panel. Everything was fine at 11. And this morning?" Poirot tapped the blown fuse. "Did you notice anything amiss?" Sanders shook his head. "No, I came in to run the pre-show check and found them dead. I replaced the fuses, but only the main one." "Very good," Poirot said. "Now, Mr. Gray, your digital dimmer installation required access to this board?" Gray looked up, eyes wide. "Indeed, but I worked on the mezzanine level, away from the main boards. I didn't touch these fuses." Hastings directed Poirot's attention to Gray's tablet. "You had a cue simulation open last night?" Gray nodded. "Simulating the blackout at the masked ball scene was part of my test, so we could program the fade to darkness as an effect. But I aborted it. I never enacted the blackout on the live circuit." Poirot tapped his moustache. "And a plausible explanation, yet one that provides a blueprint for sabotage. Next, let us speak with the lighting crew. They found 2 women in the boiler room, storing lanterns after the rehearsal. One, Miss Clara Wren, a veteran electrician. The other, young Miss Emily Talbot's older cousin Sarah. Clara wiped grease from her gloves. "Good morning, mademoiselle," Poirot said to Sarah. "Did you perform the midnight safety checks?" Sarah swallowed. "Yes, but at midnight everything worked. I locked the panel afterward." "And Clara?" Poirot turned. "You swapped fuses as part of maintenance?" Clara frowned. "I replaced a blown bulb this afternoon, but not the main fuse. That one was intact when I left." Poirot considered their statements. "Yet someone entered after your checks. Now, Hastings, we must inspect the wiring harness." He guided Hastings to the sub-basement beneath the stage, where the main power supply hummed. There, a rat's nest of cables snaked along the walls. 2 cables, thicker than the rest, led to the dimmer room. Poirot traced them with a flashlight. "See here," he said, pointing to a stripped patch of insulation. "This cable was deliberately nicked, enough to trip the circuit, but not enough to injure the saboteur." Hastings crouched. The marks match a utility knife, precise cuts. Poirot examined the smear on the cable jacket. Faint green residue. "Curious." He sniffed. "The same glaze pigment from the masked scene backdrop." Hastings whistled. "Our painter again." "Indeed," Poirot said. "Now we have a link. The sabotage uses the same paint accelerant from the arson attempt in Chapter 7. That means the culprit moves between scenic painting and electrics." They returned to the stage where the afternoon audience awaited. A delayed performance. Poirot raised his voice so the tech crew could hear. "Will Miss Violet Fairchild, our scenic artist, please report to the lighting gallery?" A hush fell. Fairchild emerged from the chorus door, makeup still on her cheeks. She approached, forehead creased. "Mademoiselle," Poirot began, "your brushwork is renowned, yet your glaze contains flammable oils. Do you know how the backdrop pigment was applied?" Fairchild swallowed. "I mixed the paint each morning, but I did not handle electrics." "Yet your pigment residue was on the sabotaged cable," Poirot said, "and your work apron was found in the boiler room alongside fuse casings." She dropped her gaze. I was there, monsieur. I overheard Mr. Sanders say he'd discovered a short yesterday. I feared reprisals, so I removed the fuse assembly, intending to hide it until morning. But my hand slipped, nicking the cable." Her voice trembled. "I never meant a blackout, only to conceal the fuse as a protective measure for my artwork." Hastings leaned in. "You used the paint's solvent to grease the fuse box and accidentally pierced the cable." Fairfield nodded through tears. "Yes, I panicked. I heard laughter in the painting loft, some mocking my new techniques. I thought if the circuits failed, they'd leave me in peace." Poirot's gaze was gentle. "Fear can drive us to rash deeds. You will face consequences, but your honesty spares tragedy." Edward Bramwell, summoned to the scene, placed a comforting hand on Fairchild's shoulder. "Your talent is invaluable, Violet, but please do not hide in silence. Speak when you fear, so we may protect, not punish you." As the blackout's cause was revealed, the company breathed a collective sigh. Mentors consoled Fairchild. Stagehands secured wire insulation. Sanders and Brand implemented new safety protocols, and Hastings offered Fairchild a reassuring smile. The Evening, as the revised performance of the Scarlet Masquerade resumed, Poirot and Hastings took their seats once more. Hastings leaned toward Poirot. Another near disaster averted, and again by confession. Poirot sipped his champagne. Yes, Hastings. Yet let us not forget that every misguided action stems from human frailty. Envy, fear, pride. Our duty is to illuminate those frailties before they strike a fatal blow. The orchestra struck up the overture. On stage, Helena March led the masked dance, her crimson gown swirling under the footlights. Every cue rang true, every prop stood pristine. And when the masked stranger revealed his face at the final bow, the audience rose in thunderous applause, unaware that, once again, the Marlowe had survived a brush with calamity. Backstage, Fairchild approached Poirot, her cheeks stained with tears of relief. "Monsieur Poirot, I cannot apologize enough." He placed a hand on her arm. "Mademoiselle, your confession saved lives. Let that be reminder. Truth, once spoken, outshines the darkest shadow." When the theatre emptied, Poirot and Hastings stepped into the London night, the marquise glow warm against the damp air. Hastings exhaled. "A theatre of endless secrets, Hercule." Poirot smiled, gloved fingers tapping his moustache. "Indeed, Hastings. Yet each secret unveiled brings us closer to harmony. Now, the Marlowe may finally embrace its next act, under the steadfast light of truth." Chapter 9. The Final Requiem of Deception. The Marlowe Theatre stood hushed in the half-light of dawn, its corridors empty, but for the soft patter of stagehands' footsteps and the distant drip of a faulty gutter. After last night's blackout, the 9th crisis to assail the company, most of the troupe had departed, yet a rare few lingered, those unwilling to leave the theatre's fate to chance. Chief among them was Hercule Poirot, who arrived at first, light accompanied by Captain Hastings, determined to strike at the heart of this cascade of sabotage once and for all. The manager's office bore the scars of haste, coffee-stained blotters, ledger pages strewn about, and a single, flickering lamp whose bulb had inexplicably dimmed. Edward Bramwell, gaunt and sleepless, greeted Poirot with an anxious bow. "Monsieur Poirot," Bramwell said, voice hollow, "we've endured enough. We need closure. Tonight's final performance must proceed without incident. Tell me you have found the culprit." Poirot's aquamarine eyes glimmered with purpose. "Patience, monsieur. In the theatre, as in life, the crescendo of deception demands a perfect resolution. I shall reveal the final note that completes our symphony of truth." He motioned Hastings forward. "First, I wish to retrace the arc of sabotage, the poison in Turner's tea, the ledger embezzlement, the arson in the scenery loft, the frayed chandelier cable, the sabotaged blackout cue. Each incident struck a different part of our theatre: food, finances, scenery, machinery, and lighting. Who alone had comprehensive access to all these domains?" Hastings frowned. "We questioned the stagehands, the prop master, the electrician, the gardener, the conductor, and even Miss Fairchild. None had the purview for every department." "Precisely," Poirot agreed. "But one man stands above them all in authority and access: the stage manager, Mr. Giles Brand." At that, Bramwell's face paled. "Brand? He's been my most reliable lieutenant." which made him the most dangerous conspirator, Poirot explained. Observe, Brand oversees every rehearsal, controls every cue sheet, keys every door. He orchestrates the flow of personnel. No incident occurred without his prior knowledge, yet always at a distance sufficient to avoid direct suspicion. Hastings exhaled. But what motive could Brand have? "Let us examine," Poirot said, leading them to the stage manager's command post behind the main control desk. Here lay the cue books, lined with Brand's precise annotations in charcoal pencil. Note: blackout, 2:15 p.m. Chandelier hush, check cable tension. Each cue feigned normalcy, yet secretly marked Brand's intended malign manipulations. Poirot opened the top book. Notice how he inserted margin notes to postpone every rehearsal by a few minutes, introducing fatigue and confusion. Then, in the ledger entries, he crossed out discrepancies with his own hand, erasing his traces. Finally, when Evelyn Harcourt's embezzlement was uncovered, he capitalized on the scandal to solidify his indispensability. In short, he engineered crisis after crisis to render himself irreplaceable and indispensable, a puppet master of disaster. Diour turned to Bramwell. "Monsieur, I recommend you secure Mr. Brand immediately." Bramwell's jaw set. "You have carte blanche, Monsieur Poirot." They ascended to the control box above the stalls. There they found Brand at his post, adjusting the variance on the gobo. He jumped when Poirot's firm voice pierced the hush. "Mr. Brand," Poirot said, "kindly step down." Brand's composure faltered under Poirot's unwavering stare. Hastings moved to block the stare. "Why, Monsieur Poirot?" Brand demanded, voice tight. "Why would I sabotage my own theatre?" Poirot lifted the cue book. "The man with the greatest motive is the man who fears obsolescence. Brand, you learned that Sir Reginald's reforms and Evelyn's presence threatened your dominion over this house. You orchestrated each calamity, poison, fire, mechanical failures, blackouts, to magnify your usefulness, forcing the company to rely on your expertise. With every crisis you patched the hole you created." Brand's lip curled. "You have no proof, only speculation, yet your handwriting matches these margin notes. Your fingerprints were on the replacement fuses. Your Wellington boot prints trailed to the cable risers. You staged the scaffold fire by smearing accelerant, obtained from the prop room, then traced Fairchild's pigment on the cables to deflect suspicion. You even tipped Turner's stage mask to spread the initial gossip of poison." Brand's shoulders slumped. He dropped his eyes. "Yes," he whispered, "I did it. I loved this theatre. I thought I could never exist without it. When changes threatened my role, I panicked." Poirot, inclining his head. "Fear can drive a man to villainy, but redemption requires confession. You have confessed. Now you must face justice." Bramwell stepped forward. "Constables," he called. 2 officers appeared and took Brand into custody. The stage manager's day of reckoning had come. As Brand was led away, Hastings exhaled. "Well, Hercule, that was masterful." Poirot tapped his moustaches. "Ah, Hastings, in every troupe there must be a leader, but that leader must serve, not dominate through dread. Brand built his empire on fear. Now he will learn it is no foundation for legacy." Outside, the Marlowe's marquee glowed brighter than ever the evening performance's name freshly painted, The Scarlet Masquerade. Reclaimed by truth. By dusk, the house was filled with an eager audience, neither ignorant of last night's blackout, nor unswayed by Bran's confession. Instead, they cheered for the theatre's resilience, for its willingness to confront and overcome. Backstage in the wings, the cast and crew gathered for a silent moment of gratitude. Helena March placed a hand over her heart. "To Monsieur Poirot," she said, voice quivering with emotion, "our guardian against the darkness." They broke into applause, and Poirot rose, bowing with modest dignity. Hastings stepped forward, raising a glass of champagne. "To the Marlowe Theatre, may it shine ever brighter, now that its secrets lie unmasked." As the company toasted, Poirot looked on, satisfaction warming his heart. Each crisis had been a trial, each confession a liberation. And through them all, the theatre had stood strong, its true light forged not by candles or footlights, but by the unyielding clarity of truth. That night, the final performance of The Scarlet Masquerade went on without a hitch. Every cue landed true, every line rang clear, and every dancer moved in perfect harmony. The audience rose in standing ovation, unaware of the dark prelude that had been vanquished, yet somehow feeling the triumph in the charged air. When the curtain fell for the last time, Poirot and Hastings slipped away into the quiet London night, the Marlowe's red door closing softly behind them. Hastings sighed in contentment. "Mon Dieu, another mystery laid to rest. Do you think they'll remember the lessons learned here?" Poirot paused under the gaslight. The theatre's sign cast a proud glow across his face. "Yes, Hastings, in a house built on artifice, truth must remain its most enduring set piece. And as long as the Marlowe stands, its guardians will recall that only honesty can illuminate the stage of life." With that, they strolled down Shaftesbury Avenue, leaving behind a theatre cleansed of deceit and poised for every encore yet to come. Chapter 10. The Gala of Second Chances. The Marlowe Theatre's grand foyer gleamed beneath its newly polished crystal chandeliers as staff and patrons gathered for the much-anticipated gala of Second Chances. Though repairs and rehearsals had restored the company's confidence, tonight's event would mark the true renewal of the theatre's reputation. An elegant charity benefit featuring a performance of The Scarlet Masquerade, followed by an auction of donated artworks to support local arts education. Invitations had been extended to London's finest, and the buzz of excitement crackled through the corridors. Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings arrived before the doors opened, invited by Edward Bramwell to ensure smooth proceedings. Hastings, in evening dress, looked every inch the dashing guest. Poirot, in formal frock coat, moustaches gleaming, surveyed the scene with his customary precision. "Mon ami," Hastings whispered as they entered, "it feels almost too genteel for our tastes." "On the contrary, Hastings," Poirot replied quietly, "beneath the finery, human nature remains the same. Even in gala splendour, passions may stir, and require the vigilance of our little grey cells." They made their way to the manager's office off the foyer, where Bramwell greeted them with visible relief. "Thank you for coming," he said earnestly. "The gala fundraising must raise at least £500 tonight. The children's outreach programme depends on it." "I understand, monsieur," Poirot said. "We shall ensure no further mishaps spoil the evening." Bramwell nodded. "I have arranged for an enhanced security detail and entrusted Giles Harper with guest reception. Mrs. Cartwright oversees hospitality, and Dr. Prentice will be on call in the green room. Should anyone require assistance, rest assured, Edward," Poirot interrupted with a small bow. "We shall proceed with both enjoyment and careful watchfulness." Beyond the office door, the foyer swelled with elegant ladies in silken gowns and gentlemen in tuxedos. A string quartet, members of Maestro Ricci's orchestra, played softly beside a dais of hors d'oeuvres. In one corner, an urn of tea sat beneath a sign, "A cup of comfort for our guests." Hastings eyed it warily. "Remember last week's poisoning, Hastings?" Poirot teased. "Proceed with the utmost caution." Hastings smirked. "I shall sip only champagne." Their first duty was to inspect the auction items. In the adjacent gallery, local artists displayed their works. Watercolours of Covent Garden, oil portraits of past Marlowe luminaries, and a particularly fine cameo brooch, once belonging to Lady Arabella Bramwell's great-aunt. The cameo, Boutique miniature portrait set in gold filigree, captured Hastings's admiration. "A lovely piece," he murmured. "I would bid handsomely." Poirot inclined his head. "A delicate artifact. Let us ensure its safety." He leaned closer to Bramwell. "Has the cameo been fully secured?" Bramwell nodded. "Yes, Miss Fairchild will guard it until the auction." He pointed to a surprised Fairchild, who stood nearby, her hands clasped over her chiffon clutch. She caught Poirot's eye and offered a shaky smile. "Good," Poirot said softly. "Then we may proceed." Before the performance, Hastings and Poirot strolled through the velvet-draped corridors to observe the gala's service arrangements. Mrs. Cartwright supervised tea trolleys and tiered cake stands. Chef Duval's flamboyantly attired assistants carried trays of canapés. Everywhere, staff moved with precise choreography. "It is like a ballet," Hastings observed. "Only the steps are pastry and punch." "Indeed," Poirot agreed. "All must move in concert, or the illusion fails." As the theatre seats filled, Bramwell took the stage to welcome guests. "Thank you for attending our gala of second chances. Tonight, we celebrate the resilience of the Marlowe Theatre and offer hope to young artists across London. After our performance, I invite you to join our auction in the foyer. Together, we shall secure a future as bright as any footlight." Applause followed, and the overture began. Hastily, Hastings and Poirot returned to their seats in the stalls, while the curtain bid the audience into the familiar world of the Scarlet Masquerade. Yet Poirot's gaze remained alert to every flicker of movement. The flutter of lace in the wings, the glint of silver in the orchestra pit, the shimmer of chandeliers above. The performance proceeded flawlessly. Orchestral swells, flawless dialogue, consummate stagecraft. At the masked ball scene, Helena March and Philip Grey led the principals through their graceful steps. The audience sighed with enchantment. As the final act concluded, the curtain descended amid thunderous acclaim. During the intermission, Hastings leaned toward Poirot. "A resounding success," he noted. "Now comes the auction." "Ah, the moment of truth," Poirot said. "Let us hope no one attempts to steal the cameo before it is sold." They rose and descended to the foyer, where bidders had gathered around the display case. Fairchild, wearing a look of fierce protectiveness, stood guard. Edward Bramwell and his solicitor manned the podium, gavel in hand. The first artworks sold briskly. A sunlit landscape fetched £50. A portrait of a pallid countess brought 70. Brims of chatter and rustling programmes created a cheerful din. The crowd's mood soared as proceeds climbed steadily. Finally, the cameo was announced. Item 12. The golden cameo of Lady Arabella Bramwell's ancestor. Bramwell lifted a glass dome, revealing the miniature's luminous face. A hush fell. "Do I hear £20? Bramwell called. A hand shot upward in the back. 20! A refined voice, male. 30? Bramwell offered. 30! Another voice, female, from the front row. 40? Bramwell asked, sweeping the room with a practised smile. 50! Hastings cried impulsively. Poirot's eyebrow lifted. Hastings flushed but sat firm. 60! Called a voice at the side. Poirot turned. Emily Talbot stood clutching her programme. 70? Bramwell offered. 70! Emily said again, bright determination in her eyes. Poirot looked closer. Emotional, yes, but Abigail Talbot was not known for adventurous bidding. Something shifted. 80, Bramwell said. 80, Elliot March, Helena's father, called, his voice carrying paternal pride. Any other bids at 80? Bramwell paused, then said, Item sold to Mr. March, £80. Applause rang out. Helena beamed, stepping forward to accept the cameo. Hastings elbowed Poirot. Well done, sir. The Talbot mystery solved. No, Hastings, Poirot murmured. Observe Emily's relief, yet also her disappointment. She did not win the cameo. He studied her expression, pride mixed with lingering longing. Before more reflection, the guests moved toward the buffet. Poirot excused himself to check on the cameo's security. He approached the display case, where a uniformed Harper now watched. Harper nodded gravely. All safe, monsieur. Poirot agreed. Excellent, and I trust the cameo will rest with Mrs. March until delivery tonight. Of course, Harper replied. Mr. March escorted it to her box. Satisfied, Poirot joined Hastings by the tea-urn. Hastings poured champagne for them both. To the Marlowe's success, Hastings toasted. And to young hearts, unafraid to bid for treasured things, Poirot replied. But let us not forget, bids can conceal secrets yet to surface. They sipped. Emily Talbot approached, her face pale. Monsieur Poirot, she said, voice trembling. I need to speak with you. Surprised, Poirot inclined his head. Of course, mademoiselle. Shall we? He led her to a quiet alcove, where the crowd's hum softened. Monsieur, I saw Mr. March hand the cameo to someone else, Emily whispered. When he collected it, he slipped it into a too large envelope and vanished into the corridor. I peeked, but he was gone. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Madame, did you inquire with Mr. March? Emily shook her head. I was too shy, but when I asked, he said Mrs. March slipped it into safekeeping. Yet I think he took it himself. Hastings frowned. The cameo is supposed to go to auction's highest bidder, Mr. March's wife. If he intercepted it, he intends something foul. Poirot tapped his moustache. Then we have a final mystery. A man who rejoiced publicly over his purchase, yet privately reclaimed the jewel. And why? For ransom? For blackmail? Or for sentimental hoarding? He raised his finger. We must confront Mr. March before the gala ends. They hurried back to the foyer, where the final notes of the string quartet drifted through the air. Poirot and Hastings scanned the crowd until they found Mr. Elliot March, conversing with a cluster of patrons. March's face held polite smiles, but his left hand flexed compulsively at his side. Poirot approached with measured calm. "Mr. March," Poirot said, "a word before you depart." March's smile faltered. "Monsieur Poirot, it has been a delightful evening." "Indeed," Poirot replied. "Yet I understand the cameo was entrusted to Mrs. March. Pray, may we see it?" March glanced around. "Of course." He opened his jacket, revealing a large envelope. From it he withdrew a small package, but inside lay not the cameo, but a scrap of velvet and a folded note. March's face drained of colour. It was stolen. Hastings leaned in. "By whom?" March shook his head. "I set it by my seat for a moment. When I returned, it was gone. I presumed—" He swallowed. "I presumed a prank." Poirot considered him. A cameo of gold and semi-precious inlay does not vanish in a prank, and yet the envelope was secure in your hand. Who moved it? Could I see your gloves? March D. extended a pair of leather gloves, spotless, unwrinkled. Under Poirot's magnifying glass, a faint smudge of green paint, identical to the scenic pigment, marred the cuff seam. Poirot held up the cuff. "Respites in this theatre are rare, Mr. March. Yet you touched the painting loft's flats yesterday, to choose your costume colours. You carried paint on your sleeve. Then you orchestrated the cameo's disappearance, framing Miss Talbot's claim." March's eyes widened. I never intended to frame her. I thought to surprise my wife with the bouquet." He broke off. Poirot nodded, "But fear of scandal drove you to conceal the theft. In removing the cameo, you deviated from the auction's purpose. Yet now, possession demands confession. Return the brooch, and clarity will follow." March's shoulders sagged. He retrieved the cameo from his pocket, handing it to Poirot with trembling fingers. The golden filigree caught the chandelier light. Poirot replaced it in its velvet case. "Thank you, Mr. March. May this lesson stay with you. Honesty purchased at any price yields the richest reward." Outside, the final guests drifted into the crisp night, leaving the Marlowe Theatre glowing against the dark. Hastings turned to Poirot. "We've unmasked every villain but the one in a gentleman's attire," he said wryly. Poirot allowed himself a small smile. "Yes, Hastings, even a kind heart can misstep when love and pride intertwine. Yet tonight, confession restored what was lost, and the gala of second chances achieved its highest purpose." They paused under the marquee, where the sign proclaimed, "The Waltz of Masquerade and Renewal." Poirot tapped his moustache. "In the theatre of life, we must play our roles with sincerity. Only then may we truly take our final bows." With that, they departed into the London night, leaving behind a company bound by trials and truths, ready to embrace every encore with open hearts. Chapter 12. The Final Curtain. The Marlowe Theatre's grand doors swung wide one last time under a pale spring sun, welcoming a select gathering of friends, patrons and performers to an intimate matinee marking the final chapter of the Scarlet Masquerade and the close of a season defined by crisis and redemption. Outside, the air was alive with the promise of renewal. Cherry blossoms drifted across the pavement, and cab drivers paused to tip their hats at well-dressed passers-by. Inside, every element of the house, so often the site of intrigue, shone with a sense of hard-won equilibrium. Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings arrived together, stepping into the hushed foyer where Mrs. Cartwright and Giles Harper awaited to greet them. The stagehands, now reassured by months of transparency and reform, moved with practised calm. The scenic painters, under Miss Fairchild's tutelage, applied their final touches to backdrops free of hidden accelerants, and the lighting crew, spearheaded by Mr. Sanders and Mr. Gray, conducted a flawless circuits check under the watchful eye of Maestro Ricci. "Mon Dieu, Hastings," Poirot murmured, as they passed beneath the chandelier restored to its original splendour. "It is as though the house itself breathes a gentle sigh of contentment." Hastings nodded, scanning the ornate plasterwork. "Truly, Hercule, we shall watch the final performance with pride rather than trepidation." They were led to their seats centre stage, just a few yards from the footlights that had once cast long shadows of fear. Edward Bramwell rose from the front row to welcome them. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, voice warm, "thank you for joining us on this special occasion. Today we celebrate not only the play's conclusion, but the resilience of the human spirit, our commitment to openness, and the shared journey that restored the Marlowe to its rightful place in London's heart." He gestured to a framed tapestry on an easel beside the aisle, an embroidery depicting the peacock staircase motif in homage to Poirot's earlier adventures at Ivyland Manor, symbolizing vigilance and truth. Beneath it, a brass plaque read, "To those who illuminate the stage of life, Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings." Bramwell continued, "Let this gift stand as a token of our gratitude. May your little grey cells inspire generations to come." Ripple of applause followed as Bramwell handed Poirot and Hastings H.E. silk-bound programme bearing their portraits in caricature form, a playful acknowledgement that, even in sobriety, the theatre retained its sense of whimsy. Poirot rose, moustaches twitching in modest delight. "Monsieur Bramwell, this is an honour I share with Captain Hastings, whose courage and steadfastness have been invaluable. But let us reflect. A theatre is more than stone and stagecraft. It is a living testament to trust. And trust, once broken, must be mended through concerted kindness and truth." With that, the lights dimmed and the overture swelled. The final performance. From the first flourish of the orchestra to the closing tableau, every actor gave their utmost. Helena March, radiant in her crimson gown, betrayed neither fatigue nor apprehension. Philip Gray moved across the stage as though buoyed by shared relief rather than haunted by near-fatal intrigue. At the masked ball, the principal dancers, joined by Emily Talbot's young pupils, glided in perfect accord, embodying the unity so long tested. Even the minor roles sparkled. Passengers of the coach scene delivered their lines with impeccable cheer, and the chorus sang with voices unburdened by fear of sabotage. During the critical moment when the dying stagehand, portrayed by Giles, Turner in a heart-stopping flashback, collapses after his poisoned cup, the audience held their breath, Yet this time, Turner's actor remained on his feet, for the moment of peril had been transformed into a triumphant display of survival. The lights shone full, the pit remained silent, and the fall into darkness that once symbolized tragedy was replaced by a dramatic spotlight. The crowd erupted into applause as Turner rose, grasping the mask of guilt in his hand, symbolically casting it aside. When the final line rang out, "May truth be our guiding star, and mercy our lasting song," the curtain descended upon a wave of cheers so thunderous it seemed to shake the rafters. For a moment, the Marlowe echoed like a temple of shared humanity, joy and healing triumphant over every shadow. Backstage revelations. After the second curtain call, Poirot and Hastings slipped backstage to witness the quiet embrace of the cast. Miss Fairchild handed small bouquets of lavender, symbolic of devotion and serenity, to each performer. Mrs. Cartwright oversaw the distribution of celebratory pastries from Chef Duval's final banquet, while Giles Harper read aloud the list of the company's newly established guiding principles, weekly honesty councils, transparent financial postings, rotating safety audits, and an annual gala devoted to community outreach. As Hastings sampled a petit four, he nudged Poirot. "Our work here seems complete, n'est-ce pas?" Poirot surveyed the triumphant scene. Recovery of trust, restoration of reputation, and renewal of purpose. "Yes, Hastings, but let us not forget the true epilogue, the bonds formed in adversity, which now shine undimmed." At that moment, Edward Bramwell emerged from his office, gesturing for Poirot's attention. He led them through a final corridor to the gathering of painted flats in the scenery loft. There, a new mural had been commissioned, a phoenix rising from stylized flames, its wings etched in gold leaf and tempera. Beneath it, a simple plaque read, "From Ashes to Art, the Marlowe Theatre Reborn." Bramwell smiled through tears. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, this theatre owes its second life to your wisdom and integrity." Poirot bowed. "Monsieur, the Marlowe has reclaimed its own fate through the collective courage of its people. I merely shone a light upon the path." An evening of gratitude. That night, the foyer filled once again, this time with musicians, philanthropists and civic leaders, gathered for a private reception to honour the company. Hastings found himself engaged in animated conversation about upcoming European tours and potential film adaptations of The Scarlet Masquerade. Meanwhile, Poirot stood on a balcony overlooking the crowd, sipping tea and reflecting on the journey. Moments later, Helena March joined him. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, "on behalf of every actor and stagehand, I thank you. You have given us back not only our stage, but our dignity." He inclined his head. "Mademoiselle, your performance this evening was moving proof that art and the human spirit can transcend any darkness." The garden doors opened, admitting Lady Arabella Bramwell and her nephew Edward, who had travelled from Ivyland Manor to witness the gala's culmination. Lady Arabella, silver hair gleaming, offered Poirot her hand. "My dear friend," she said, "seeing the Marlowe restored fills my heart. Ivyland's peacocks may have eyes of stone, but your peacock's eye, your little grey cells, have soul and kindness." Poirot's aquamarine gaze met hers. "Madame, your own courage in forgiveness inspired me. It has been my privilege to serve." Edward Bramwell joined them. "Monsieur Hastings, I must insist you accept our invitation to dine at Ivyland Manor next month. Consider it a promise that the bonds forged here endure." Hastings grinned. "I accept with pleasure, sir." Farewell to the stage. As the reception wound down, Poirot and Hastings prepared to take leave. They paused in the centre of the foyer, beneath the scaffolded chandelier, now spotless and gleaming. "Mon ami," Hastings said, "what is next for us?" Poirot's moustaches twitched in contentment. "Our work is never done, Hastings, but, for now, let us relish the Marlowe's victory, its final curtain rising upon a future luminous with truth." They strolled to the stage door, bidding good night to those still tidying props and dusting footlights. Outside, the cool air carried the distant strains of a street violinist playing a gentle waltz. Poirot paused to listen, the melody echoing the theatre's newfound harmony. Hastings linked arms with him. A fitting lullaby for the end of our tale. Poirot nodded. "Yes, Hastings. And may the echo of this waltz remind us always that the greatest performances begin and end with honesty." Under the softly glowing London lamps, they disappeared into the night, leaving behind a theatre reborn, a story concluded, and a legacy of trust to guide every encore yet to come.